Hi guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Moya and today I'll be showing you how I made this beautiful dress. I used to have the green one, but someone bought it, and every time I wore that green dress, even strangers stopped me to ask that they wanted it. So this dress is absolutely gorgeous. You're going to get a lot of compliments, and you can wear this dress to church, you can wear it for casual outings, maybe work on Fridays. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel because I'll be bringing you more sweet tutorials, and also follow me on Instagram to see how I style my dresses. Without any further ado, let's get into the video. This is a rough sketch of what we're making. We're making a bustier dress with 3 steps of gathers, like a Gypsy dress, right? And also we're going to have ruffled sleeves, and then yes, that's it. So now let's move on to the measurements we'll be needing for this dress. First of all, you will need your shoulder to waist, need your waist to ankle. You should also take your full length, and I'll be using 60 inches for my full length. Then my shoulder to waist is 15.5. If I do 60 inches minus 15.5, I'm going to get 44.5, and I'm going to just approximate that to 45. So now, since we have 3 layers for our dress, I'm going to divide 45 by 3, and I'm going to get 15. That means that for each layer, each panel, I'm going to be using 15 inches for the length. Now let's get the width of our panels, and how wide our panels are going to be. So for the first layer, I'm going to be using 60, and my waist is around 27. So minimum that you should be doing is your waist measurement times 2. So if you are bigger than me, then you know what to do. For the second layer, I'm going to be using 60 inches, the one that I used for the first layer, and I'm going to multiply it by 1.5. The length of my second panel is now 90. You can either do 60 times 2, or you can do 60 times 2.5. 60 times 2.5 was perfect, and I was able to do my gathers properly. So I've cut all my pieces off camera, and when you are cutting, don't forget to add your allowance. For the first 2 layers, add 1 inch allowance, so you are cutting 16 for the first 2 layers, and then for the third layer you can use at least 17, because you know that you're still going to fold it down. So keep all those things in mind. So this is my first layer, and it is folded into 2 because my table is not wide enough. So I sewed the 2 edges together, and I'm going to be notching the midpoint when I match the points that I just sewed. And I'm also going to get the sides. To get the sides, I'm just going to match the midpoint, that's the center front, and the parts that I sewed, and I'm just going to sew on the sides like that. I hope you understand. So when I sewed with about 3/4 of an inch, and then I also opened up a little part, that is where my pockets are going to enter, because I want to put pockets on my dress. Now you want to transfer that center knot that is on top. You want to make sure that it is on top and at the bottom of your first layer. Then for the second panel, I will get the center front and the center back. Then I'll fold the center front and center back together to get the sides, and I will notch that as well. So essentially, you want to get the center front, the center back, and then the sides. Just notch all of those so that when you want to attach, it will be very easy for you. Don't forget to duplicate the notches so that what you have on top is also what you have below. So your notches is on both sides of your second layer. Does that make sense? So that when you join to the first layer, you still have your notches to attach to the third layer. Now you want to match your first and second panels. What you're going to do is to place these side notches together, like you can see that I've done. Then you're going to match the center front notch with the center front notch of the first and the second layers, and then you pin. When you're pinning, you're doing right side to right side. When you are done with the center front, you move to the side, and then you just do it all round. So when you are done with this, ideally the second part is bigger, obviously, so the second part will kind of sag, and that is exactly what we need. Once we are done with that, we're going to go over to the sewing machine. So now we're making our gathers on the saggy part of our project, and I put my machine on 5. That's the loosest stitch on my machine. I'm going to show you guys later. Then I'm going to sew a straight stitch. Once I'm done sewing this straight stitch, I'm going to make sure that there is enough rope, just the amount that you need. Just cut that, and then you pull just one thread. Instead of pulling the 2, you pull just one, and then you adjust your fabric like you can see me do. You can also do this from the other side as well, so that your thread does not cut. And guys, that is it. It is very simple. So now that you're done gathering the second layer, you just make sure that the length of your gathers is the same as the first layer. Then you're going to place it on the first layer. Just try to adjust the gathers so that it looks nice. You don't want one part to be looking like it's more gathered than the others. Just try to use your eyes to gauge it, and then you're going to sew from one point to the other point, just the point that you gathered, and then you're going to move on to the next section. Remember that we attached the first layer to the second layer on each notch. That's the center front, center back, then the sides. We attach them with pins. So I'm just going to return my machine to 2. That is what I normally like to use. I use 5 for the gathers, so I will return it to 2, and then I'm going to sew this one that we have just done, the gathers that we have just done. Just a recap on what I've just said, I'm going to put my machine on the longest stitch, and that is also the loosest stitch on my machine. And I'm going to sew a straight stitch from the first gathers that we've just made. I'm going to make it to another point where I have a pin inserted on my project. Then I'm going to pull from both sides. Remember that we're pulling just one thread. I'm going to pull one thread from one side and one thread from the other side, and then I'm going to make my gathers. Once I'm done making my gathers, I'm going to adjust the gathers properly so that it fits the first layer that we're working on, and I'm going to return my machine back to 2. That is what I normally use to sew. So if you use 3 to sew, return it to 2, anything you like. And then I'm going to sew on the second layer. So I'm sewing the gathers that I made with the second layer. I'm sewing it with the straight piece that is the first layer. I hope you understand. So after I've done that for all the parts on my second layer, this is my result. Absolutely beautiful. Then I'm going to place the third layer just the way I did the second layer. If you've forgotten, then go and watch it again. Rewind. So I'm going to place the center front of the third layer with the center front of the second layer. Then I'm going to pin everything, the sides, the center back, everything. And once I'm done, I'm going to make my gathers. Now let's move on to cutting our padded bustier. So I place my tape from where I want my chest to start. Okay, then that's 5 inches. Then I will get my horizontal measurement. My chest line is 7.5. My bust point is 9.5. Under bust is 13, and waist is 15.5. But I added ½ inch for allowance. That is 16. In case you're wondering why I took my measurement like that, I just assumed that I took my measurement from my shoulder line. So I took my shoulder to bust point, under bust, and waist like that. So now I'm going to take my bust point to bust point, which is 7. If I divide that by 2, I'll get 3.5. So I did ½ inch allowance, and I am just marking for on different points on my paper like you can see. Then you're going to connect this to get a straight line. From that straight line that I've just made, I'm going to take 2.5 on my under bust area, and I'm also going to take 2.5 on my waist area, and I'm going to connect with a ruler. Then I'm going to come over to my bust point, and I'm going to take 1.25 down. Then I'm also going to take 1.25 from that point. Then I'm still going to connect the under bust area to the bust area. I'm going to come to the top of my paper, and I'm going to take 1 inch from my line. Then I will connect to the bust point area. This point I'm marking out, we're not cutting it, okay? I'm going to come over to the line that I just made, and I'm going to take 1.5. I'm going to mark that. Then I'm going to connect this new point that I marked to the existing bust point. So this curved area that I'm marking is what we're going to be cutting out later. So now let's just take our body measurements. Now I want to take the measurement for the part above my chest. So I'm just going to take my back measurement, which is 7.5, and I'm going to add half inch, 1.5. Sorry, 1.5 is what we removed from this part that I told you we're cutting out. So I'm just going to connect that to my chest line. So now let's take our bust measurements. My bust divided by 4 is 8.75, so I'm going to mark that. I'm going to come to my waistline. My waistline divided by 4 is 6.75, and remember that we're taking out 2.5 in the middle, so you're going to add that. It is very important that you do not forget. So I'm going to mark that. Then I'm going to connect the lines, like you can see. Once I'm done with that, I want to add seam allowance. And when I was doing this, I added only 2 inches, but you want to add minimum of 2.5 to 3 inches. Normally I would use 3 inches, but I added 2 inches, and it still works anyway, just so that you have enough allowance when you're doing your own. So I marked the allowance, and then I'm going to connect. I also made a little curve at the armhole area, and now it's time to cut out this part that we need to cut out on our project. Also, don't forget that for your breast padding area, you need curves and not sharp edges. So make sure you round those edges that you can see there, just make it curved. So now we have our pattern ready, and for my chest area, I want a little bit of sweetheart. I don't want it to just be straight, so I'm just going to come down by 1 inch, and then I'm going to connect it like you can see. Then when I am cutting, I'm going to make a little bit of curve, and now it's time to cut on my fabric. Now the fabric I'm using, it is cotton, and I ironed my interfacing on the fabric that will be outside. That's a haystay. It is like a little thick. Then for the lining, I'm using paper gum. Now I'm using the same fabric for both the lining and the main fabric because I didn't remember to get actual lining, but I have enough fabric, so that works. So once I'm done ironing my interfacing, this is what I have. I just folded them into both of them, and then I'm going to use my pattern to cut out both the main fabric and the lining. So right here, guys, we're saving time, we're saving energy, and we're saving money because time is money. Also, I have that little extension over there because I don't want my top to be sinking. I just want to be able to have control when I'm sewing, so that I can cut whatever I don't need out. So now, guys, look at what we've done. We have the main fabric, and I'm just arranging that, and also we have the lining. I placed 5 inches on top of my paper, and from there I will get my shoulder to chest, my shoulder to bust, my shoulder to waist, and I also added 1.5 for zip allowance. I will take my waist divided by 4, which is 6.75, then I'll add 2 inches for allowance and also 1 inch for the back slope. Then on my chest area, I'm going to take my bust divided by 4, which is 8.75, then I'm going to add 2 inches for seam allowance, and I'm going to connect the points. Also on top of my paper, I'm going to mark 5.5, and that's how wide I want my chest to be, and I'm going to slant it a bit like you can see. Because I don't want my back to be just straight, I'm going to make a slight V shape, so I'm just going to mark that. Now it's time to cut. On my zip allowance, I'm going to come out by 0.5, and I'm going to connect it to my bust area, then I'm going to cut. Remember that we don't want a sharp edge, so I'm going to make a slight curve with my scissors. I'm just going to curve that out. Now, just the way we did the front, I ironed haystay on the main fabric, but I didn't use anything for the lining. I folded this piece of haystay into 4, and I'm going to cut 4 pieces that I'm going to use to pad my top. After I got the point that I used for my bust point, I shaped the back gently. Like you can see, I'm just going to arrange 2 pieces of hairstay on each side of the bustier. So on the other side as well, I'm going to arrange 2 pieces. Then for the center piece, I placed 2 pieces of material on fold, and I ensured to drop the neck to form a sweetheart below the actual neck, just to ensure easy folding. So now I've ironed the 2 pieces of interfacing that we just cut to the main fabric, and also this is my lining. This is what it looks like, and now it's time to sew. So first I'm going to be sewing the lining. I'm just going to align the down part of the project, the bustier that we're doing, and then I'm going to follow the curve. The first time you are sewing your bustier, it may not come out as smooth and as curvy as you want it to be. Sometimes you may have all these funny shapes, but keep trying, guys. If you see that it's not good, then loosen it and do it again. Don't be lazy. The more you practice, the better you get. It's not just the first day you try to sew it that you try to sew the curve on your bustier that you get it. It takes a lot of time and practice. So if you are just following the curve small, like you can see me do in the video, then you're absolutely going to get it. So once I was done sewing, I just went ahead to use my scissors to make small notches on the parts that I've just sewn, but I didn't allow it to cut through the thread, because if you cut through the thread, then there'll be a problem. So just cut small, and yes, you can cut from the part that is not curved. Just cut all the way up, just little notches, and do this for both sides of your sewing. And when you're done, we're going to do something called, I don't know if is it an under stitch or is it a top stitch. So we're just going to sew the parts that I've just sewn. We're going to sew it on the main project that we're doing. For some people it is easier to sew from outside, and for another person it might be easier to sew from inside. So wherever you find it more comfortable, then do it. So I'm going to show you how to sew from inside now. Okay, it's just to place the notched area. You're going to place it on your main fabric, and then you're just going to sew carefully. If you're not careful enough, then you're going to have some gaping. Is it gaping? I don't know, but you're going to not have a smooth stitch. So just be careful when you're sewing. So just the way we sew the lining is the way we are going to sew the main fabric. And what I just did here was to notch the main fabric, but I didn't top stitch. So now I'm using this breast bow. It's called a breast bow, and that's what I'm going to use to open my seam. So I just want to place my main fabric on top of the breast bow, like you can see. Then I'm going to gently open the sewed area. Is that right? So I'm going to gently open it like that, and I'm going to iron with a steam iron. If you iron with a steam iron, then your seam is going to rest better. So once I'm done opening that, I'm going to use smaller pieces of the hairstay. I just cut like rectangular pieces, then I used it to iron on the parts that I just opened. So what this does is that it just makes your seam to lie flat, and your sewing is going to come out better. So off camera, I went ahead to turn the back pieces, and I joined the zipper area together. I also ironed, and it looks nice and clean. Then for the front part, you can see that it has a little bit of shape. I am just going to fold it together, and you see that part that is sticking out. I'm going to reduce it and cut it out. I'm going to cut like a little armhole there, and I'm going to go off camera, and I'm going to turn the neckline. Also, I trimmed the neckline of the front to be the same with what is on the back, because that is just perfect. And now it is time to shape my bustier. So to shape my bustier, I'm going to place my tape from one point on my bustier to the other side, and I got 20. So I'm just going to place 20 that I got from the first part. I'm going to place it on the second part of my bust. So I'm going to do it one after the other, and then what I'm looking for is 35. I'm going to make that mark. Then I'm going to mark what is left. What is left is about 4.5. So I'm going to divide that by 4. So I know on the bust area my allowance is 1.1. And I'm also going to repeat the same step for the waist area, and that is how I'm going to measure my allowance. So now when it's time to sew my side seams, when it's time to shape my bustier, I'm going to make sure that the front bustier and the back of the bustier aligned properly, like you can see. So for this side, I'm going to align them, and then I'm going to take my allowance, and then I'm also going to do the same for the other side. So I'm done shaping my bustier, and this is what it looks like. Absolutely gorgeous. If you remember the way I taught you to always attach your gathers, that is exactly how I attach my gathers to my bustier, and this is the result, guys. Don't you just love it already? So what is left now is the sleeve. So guys, now it's time to cut my sleeves, and to cut my sleeves, all I have to do is to add what I have on the neckline of the front and back. Then I'm going to measure my round shoulder, and I'm going to subtract this. Whatever you have, you divide it by 2. So for the wideness of my sleeve is 15, and for the length, that's how long the sleeve is going to be, is 13. So I folded the 15 into 2. That's the wideness of my sleeve, right? So, and then I'm going to head over to the sewing machine and sew both of them. So remember again, the length of my sleeve is 13. Actually it's 12, but I have 1 inch for joining to the main dress. So now I'm just turning it over to the right side. I turn both of them, and just for aesthetics, I made the sewing to be in the middle of the wrong side. And now it's time to attach the main dress. So all I'm going to do is just to pleat on the armhole area that we already have. So when you're pleating, just pleat it to become like, say, 3 inches max. That's all. That's fine. And guys, this is our result. We're done attaching the sleeves, and now it's time to do the pockets. For my pockets, I folded my fabric into 4, like you can see, and I just cut out a rounded shape for my pocket. Your pocket can be however you want. The length or the wideness of your pocket is totally up to you. So for the parts where my hand is going to enter, I made it about 7 inches, so that by the time I sew in, I am going to have about 6 inches. So I just opened this part, like you can see. Then I'm going to measure the part I told you I was going to use 7 inches. I'm going to measure, and I'm going to cut this shape out. So guys, that is it. So now I'm going to attach this to my skirt area. Remember that when we were cutting and sewing the other time, we made space for our pockets to enter. So now I'm just going to attach it off camera, and that is it on how to make this beautiful gown. If you end up trying it out, don't forget to tag me on Instagram. I would love to see it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in my next one. Bye guys.